What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. A couple of weeks ago I made a video talking about Afghanistan and its current situation right now. Very chaotic and violent, and now there's more news that's come out and it's changed, but not for the better. So I remember in that video we talked about how the Taliban was overrunning many of the Afghanistan forces, how they had captured more than 200 or about 200 of the 400 provinces in Afghanistan. Now the situation has taken a kind of dramatic turn, and for the worse, as I mentioned earlier. Now the Taliban has 230 districts out of the 400, and they say in less than a week the Taliban has overrun 1/4 of Afghanistan's provincial capitals and a huge swath of territory across the north of the country. The security situation here is unraveling faster than almost anyone expected. 9 provincial capitals have now fallen to the insurgent group, several cases with minimal resistance from Afghan security forces. The Taliban now control territory they were unable to subdue when they were in power between 1996 and 2001. So now they've amassed more than half of the land of Afghanistan, and now they control more than they were able to when they were actually in control of the country in the late 90s and early 2000s, before 9/11 and the US took military action against the Taliban. Now it appears that Afghanistan is once again going to be in control, or it's at least threatened to be in control by the Taliban. They say that security forces in many parts of the country seem overwhelmed, fearful of assassination or car bombs, and of relentless Taliban offensive that is forcing the government to choose what it will defend and what it will surrender. Afghanistan's best troops, the US-trained commandos, are overstretched. Besides the provincial capitals that have already fallen, another dozen or so are under imminent threat, surrounded and connected to Kabul only by air. Now, Kabul is the nation's capital, I believe, and it is like the lifeline of it, and so far it hasn't been threatened too much by the Taliban, although they are making significant inroads to it, and the latest intelligence suggests that Kabul could become under severe pressure within 30 days if the current trends hold, and they could gain full control of the country within a couple of months. So the situation there was looking pretty dire. Now, remember in the last video we talked about how there were many people displaced, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the country, and food was becoming scarce. There wasn't a lot of money to go around. People had to shelter with each other, packing into tiny little homes to the tune of 36 people. Like, the situation over there is dire, to say the least. And it's only getting worse because as the Taliban proceed across the country, they are releasing prisoners as they go and replenishing their own troops. This I hear that the Taliban said Wednesday that they had taken control of the main prison in Kandahar city and released about 1,000 inmates. They have done the same elsewhere, often replenishing their ranks in the process. A government spokesman acknowledged the prison had fallen and said most of the inmates were criminals. So the Taliban is literally breaking people out of jail just so they can have more troops to fight against the government and capture more territories and military bases as well. And these military bases have provided the Taliban with armored vehicles, Humvees, heavy weapons, and dozens of ubiquitous pickup trucks, which all help them in their cause of overthrowing the government in very violent fashion. And it doesn't even stop at the government. They have proceeded to kill almost 6,000 people at this point. That's thousands of people have died, not including the people who have had to flee their homes, had their homes destroyed, their entire livelihoods ruined, and lives just completely uprooted. Now, if you remember in the previous video, we talked about how there's just gunfire all the time everywhere, and people have to live with it in fear, cowering for their lives. And that hasn't changed so far. They say here that Taliban fighters dragged the shoeless, bloody corpse of an Afghan security force member through the street shouting, "God is great." Taliban fighters carrying M16 rifles and driving Humvees and Ford pickup trucks donated by the Americans who rolled through the streets of the capital. And they say the situation is under control in the city. Our mujahideen are patrolling in the city, one Taliban fighter who did not give his name said, referring to his fellow insurgents as holy warriors. And they say the crackle of automatic weapon fire continued throughout the day in Farah. Okay, so the mujahideen are their guerrilla warriors, really. That's kind of what they are. So they're members of the Taliban. So they took control of the city and have killed the Afghan government's troops there and are considering themselves holy warriors. Now, I'm not aware of what the religious differences is between the Taliban and Afghan government, but it seems to me that there's probably one, seeing as how they're holy warriors, I guess fighting for their god or whatever. But it seems to me there is at least some type of religious aspect to this conflict, although I'm not sure how deep that cause is, like how significant that cause is in why the Taliban is having this violent rebellion or onslaught against the Afghan government. And I'm sure that goes back hundreds of years, the real reason, because Afghanistan has been in conflict for decades and decades and decades, as far as I know. But whatever the cause, the violence they're causing is having a real effect on not only the populace, the civilians, but on the soldiers, the Afghan soldiers as well, who are trying to stop the Taliban. They say they saw a graphic example of how low morale is among some army units on a visit to the city of Ghazni, 3 hours from Kabul. A group of soldiers who had been under fire from Taliban snipers simply ran from their base, flagged down a passing car, and left. When CNN returned to the same base the following day, some soldiers had changed into civilian clothes, a clear sign of their fear of the Taliban, of a desire to melt away should the rebels get any closer. On Wednesday, video from airbase in Kunduz, I butchered that, I apologize, in the north showed many surrendering soldiers not wearing uniforms. So security forces, as they refer to them as, are just trying to hide from the Taliban by putting on civilian clothes. And it seems to me almost like desertion by doing that, just trying to hide with the normal populace. I would say that's cowardly, but I'm in no position to judge them because I never joined the military. I'm not over there with them experiencing what they're experiencing, the violence, the fear, seeing your friends being dragged through the street, your friends' dead bodies. So I can totally understand why they do that, although you could argue that they have a duty to protect those that can't protect themselves. But again, I really can't judge them for this too much. It seems like a horrific situation for everyone involved, and a situation I'd never wish on my worst enemy. But because of their troops deserting or just being backed into a corner in general, Afghanistan, it appears, has resorted to allying themselves with actual warlords. They say, in addition to the northeast, much of the northern Afghanistan has fallen to the Taliban, except for the Balka province. I butchered that again. Their warlords Abdul Rashid Dostum, Adam Mohammed Noor, and Mohammed Mohaki plan to mobilize forces in support of the Afghan government to push back the Taliban. So the Afghan government, the Afghan situation is so dire right now that they have to actually align themselves with these warlords and the warlords with each other, because these warlords fight all the time amongst themselves, and to put aside their differences to fight the Taliban, that just shows you how dire the situation is. I mean, there have been reports that the Taliban have imposed repressive restrictions on women and burned down schools and even revenge killings, which are exactly what you imagine them to be. Killing someone in revenge for some slight that they did to you. And it's not even the person that insulted you or did something against you in particular. It could be you killing their friend, their family member, something like that to get back at them. So it could be just killing some innocent person that had nothing to do with whatever disagreement or conflict you had. So the Taliban is sanctioning these heinous acts to take place over there. And the only outside help the Afghans are looking to receive is from the Turkish. They say, meanwhile, the Turkish president, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, whose country is contemplating running and protecting Kabul airport following the withdrawal of U.S. and NATO troops. So at the moment, the country of Turkey looks like Afghanistan's best bet right now. And really, they're not even doing too much except for protecting the airport. Because if they control the airport, they control really everything else. And that's the capital too. That's Kabul airport. And once the Taliban had control of the capital city of Kabul and their airport and everything like that, they'd have control over the entire country for all intents and purposes. So it really is a Tartarian situation over there, guys. The U.S. is only doing minor bombing runs. But other than that, they have almost no help from anybody outside the country. But something needs to be done. Someone needs to help, either the UN, the United States. Someone needs to step in and help subdue the Taliban, because they're killing thousands of innocent civilians. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.